And one of the core issues to come out of Davos is the extent to which you can get the world converging on a common set of norms and values. Now, this is back on the heels of issues that have come up in 2010 regarding regulations for the banking industry, and also trying to talk about managing trade relations between the Western world and the emerging markets, growth paths, and issues also about reserve currencies that have come to the fore. One man who sits, I think, straddles both parameters is the current chair of AngloGold Ashanti, once the governor of the South African Reserve Bank, a banker now. He can give us a perspective on how the world is changing. Tito Mboweni, thank you very much for your time. Your views on the changing global architecture at the moment?
Well, I mean, we are emerging now from one of the worst recessions, and the prognosis is that we'll see some positive growth through the course of this year. India and China are still pumping very well, and so are other Asian countries. Africa is expected to grow very well. So are parts of Latin America and the United States. It's expected to show some modest growth. Europe, fairly low growth, but positive. Inflation is fairly contained around the world, even though demand pressures might cause inflation to start rising a bit. But overall, the situation is encouraging. As in central banking speak, they say the global economy seems to be improving but hesitant.
Right. Okay, now you've painted for us quite a comprehensive picture, but there's already fears, for instance, with sovereign debt issues in Europe worsening, that the situation could be a lot bleaker. There's already threats of rising inflation in the UK, for instance, possibly in the United States, and we're told that from a situation of low interest rates, we could see towards the end of the year interest rates rising, certainly in the Western world, as we started seeing in these very fast-growing economies such as India and China. What does that mean for the global economy?
I think that the sovereign debt crisis in Europe is an issue of serious concern to many people around the world. One is just hoping that the measures which have been put in place by the ECB and the Eurozone country governments would assist the process of bringing back the spreads, for example, and that will not go into a full-blown crisis throughout the whole Eurozone. That would not be good for the global economy. And speaking for South Africa, that would not be good for South Africa because Europe still counts for a major part of our trade. I think that despite all these difficulties, the measures put in place in Europe, still the fiscal and monetary conditions in the United States, and the growth in India and China and Africa and Latin America, I think we're in for a better year.
I mean, you alluded to the fact that Africa is growing, in fact, above the international average. But what we're not seeing is a huge momentum for capital flows into the rest of Africa, with the exception of South Africa. South Africa, obviously, the rise in tide in capital flows has meant a much stronger rand, and that's created a dilemma for policymakers. But that's the sort of investment that should also be channeled into the rest of Africa. What's the missing link?
Well, a recent study by the Reuters Thomson Group indicates that merger and acquisition activity in sub-Saharan Africa during the course of 2010 was somewhere around $44 billion. That's huge, and most of it did not come into South Africa, but went into other parts of the world. Already, of course, in South Africa, we see major mergers and acquisitions activity, Walmart and Massmart activity. That's very encouraging indeed. But we also see lots of inflows into telecoms in parts of Africa. Interestingly, there's beginning to be an interest in agriculture and other commodities. We see major developments in Ghana, the discovery and pumping of oil and gas now, very good for inflows. Now, of course, there's many types of inflows, portfolio inflows and actual capital inflows. So I think South Africa has experienced more of the portfolio inflows, but also a bit of the investment, capital investment, so which is good. I mean, it's a balance. Of course, on the portfolio inflows, there's a debate out there whether that is good or not for emerging markets or growth markets. I tend to sit on the fence there. because portfolio inflows are also critical in the financing of the current account of the balance of payments. But on the other hand, that might result in overvalued exchange rates, which might cause further balance of payments problems as well.